My name is Rachel Mitchell, and I just turned 28 last month. 2 weeks ago, I buried my Uncle Harold, the only person in my wealthy family who ever truly understood me. While everyone else saw me as the disappointment, the black sheep who chose teaching over the family hotel empire, Uncle Harold called me brave. Now I sit in this leather chair, surrounded by relatives who barely acknowledge me, waiting for the will reading. I never expected much, but what happened next changed everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this family drama unfolds. To understand what happened at that will reading, you need to know about the Mitchell family. We're not just wealthy, we're old money with new money ambitions. My grandfather started with one luxury hotel in Boston 60 years ago and built it into the Mitchell Hotel Group, now with 36 properties across North America. Our family name appears in business magazines and charity gala programs with equal frequency. I grew up in a 20-room house in Connecticut where appearances mattered more than feelings. My mother, Catherine, hosted perfect dinner parties while my father, Richard, expanded the empire. They gave us everything except emotional warmth. My brother Garrett, 11 years my senior, was groomed from birth to take over the company. He embraced it, majoring in business at Wharton before joining the family firm. By 30, he was COO. Now at 39, he runs daily operations with the calculated precision of someone who measures success in acquisitions and profit margins. My sister Amber, 2 years younger than me at 26, handles the company's public relations. She's brilliant at it, beautiful, charming, and completely comfortable in the spotlight. Amber knows exactly which charities are trending and which social causes will generate the right press. She's married to a surgeon from a suitable family, lives in a penthouse in Manhattan, and has never worn the same designer outfit twice. Then there's my cousin Blake, 35, who manages international expansion. He's been living in Europe for the past decade, opening hotels in London, Paris, and Milan. Blake speaks 4 languages fluently and has dated models from every fashion capital. The family loves to showcase him as our sophisticated European connection. Hovering over everyone is Aunt Pamela, my father's sister and Uncle Harold's younger sibling. After my grandmother passed, Pamela appointed herself family matriarch. She's in her early 60s, twice divorced from equally wealthy men, and treats family gatherings like board meetings where she holds the controlling interest. And then there was Uncle Harold. Harold was my father's older brother, but they couldn't have been more different. Where my father was rigid and traditional, Harold was adventurous and unconventional. He never married, traveled constantly, and spoke his mind regardless of social consequences. He held a significant stake in the family business, but rarely attended meetings, preferring to send detailed notes that always somehow identified the one critical issue everyone else had missed. My earliest memory of Uncle Harold is from when I was 7. During a formal family dinner, I knocked over a crystal glass, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth. While my mother froze in horror and my father glared, Uncle Harold started laughing. "Well done, Rachel. I've been wanting to brighten up this dull table all evening." He then proceeded to knock over his own glass deliberately, winking at me as the adults gasped. As I grew older, Harold became my confidant. When I was 16 and announced I wanted to become a teacher instead of joining the business, my parents reacted as though I'd declared an intention to join the circus. "Teachers earn nothing," my father said dismissively. "It's a waste of your potential and our name." That evening, Harold called me. "I hear you've discovered your passion," he said. "Tell me everything." He listened for an hour as I explained my desire to work with children who needed good educators, not just manage properties or attend galas. When I finished, he said something I'll never forget. "The true measure of wealth is how richly you live according to your own values, not anyone else's." From that moment, Harold supported my dreams. He helped me research education programs, came to my college graduation when my parents conveniently scheduled a business trip that weekend, and even helped me furnish my first tiny apartment when I started teaching at an elementary school in a struggling neighborhood in Boston. Over the years, the family gradually distanced themselves from Harold. They called him eccentric, difficult, even senile as he aged into his 70s. He sold his Manhattan apartment and bought a modest cabin in Vermont, disappearing on long international trips without telling anyone where he was going. The family whispered that he was wasting his share of the fortune on frivolous adventures. What they didn't know was that Harold and I stayed close. We spoke weekly, and he sent me postcards from Switzerland, Japan, Argentina, always with the same message: living richly. I never asked about his finances. It seemed inappropriate. Our connection was about the values we shared, not money. 8 months before he died, Harold invited me to dinner during one of his rare visits to Boston. He seemed unusually serious. "Rachel," he said, "I need you to know that I've been watching the family carefully for years. I've been conducting a sort of experiment." When I asked what he meant, he smiled mysteriously. "You'll understand someday. Just promise me you'll always stay true to yourself, no matter what happens." It was the last time I saw him. The family pressured me to stop communicating with him, claiming he was becoming mentally unstable. I regret listening to them, even briefly. 3 weeks after my 20th birthday, we received word that Harold had passed away peacefully in his sleep at his Vermont cabin. Uncle Harold's funeral was exactly what he would have hated, a spectacle of wealth rather than genuine mourning. The family chose the most exclusive funeral home in Boston, decorated with elaborate flower arrangements that cost more than my monthly salary. The closed mahogany casket gleamed under perfect lighting, and a string quartet played softly in the background. It felt like a business function with better floral arrangements. I stood in the corner of the reception afterward, watching my relatives network with business associates who had attended to pay respects. My father shook hands with the CEO of a competing hotel chain, discussing a potential partnership as if they were at a conference. My mother air-kissed socialites while subtly mentioning the new Mitchell property opening in Scottsdale. Even in death, Harold was an opportunity for advancement. He would have absolutely hated this, a voice said beside me. I turned to find Blake, champagne flute in hand, surveying the room with amused detachment. "Then why did you help plan it?" I asked, knowing he'd flown in from Milan specifically to assist with the arrangements. Blake shrugged. The Mitchell image must be maintained. Besides, the old man had become a bit of an embarrassment, hadn't he? Wandering around Europe, staying in hostels instead of our hotels. People were starting to talk. I felt a surge of anger. He wasn't wandering. He was living exactly how he wanted. Yes, well, that's a luxury most of us don't allow ourselves. Blake sipped his champagne. I hear his estate is quite substantial, despite his modest lifestyle. Apparently, he made some clever investments over the years. Before I could respond, I overheard 2 of my cousins nearby, not bothering to lower their voices. "I heard he's leaving the Vermont property to the housekeeper," one said. "Well, I'm expecting that collection of first editions. He practically promised them to me last Christmas," replied the other. I excused myself, feeling sick. Everywhere I turned, family members were speculating about the inheritance, barely acknowledging that we'd just lost someone special. I slipped into the hallway for some air and found myself face to face with my brother Garrett. "There you are," he said, looking impeccable in his tailored black suit. "Mother was wondering where you'd disappeared to. You should be circulating." "I needed a moment," I said. "This feels wrong. Uncle Harold would have wanted something simple." Garrett straightened his already perfect tie. What Harold wanted ceased to matter when he decided to turn his back on family responsibilities. Unlike some people, the rest of us understand our obligations to the Mitchell name. The implication was clear. I haven't turned my back on anything, I defended myself. I just chose a different path. Yes. Teaching finger painting to 6-year-olds. A truly valuable contribution. His smile didn't reach his eyes. At least Harold had the excuse of actual success before he went off the rails. What's your excuse for wasting your potential? Before I could respond, Amber glided over, perfect in her designer morning outfit. There you both are. Daddy's looking for you, Garrett. Something about the Thompson merger. She waited until our brother walked away before turning to me. Rachel, darling, we need to get together soon. It's been ages since I've seen your cute little apartment. Though I don't know how you live in such a tiny space. It must be so cozy. Her backhanded compliment stung exactly as intended. My one-bedroom apartment was modest but comfortable, and I'd made it my own. Still, compared to her 3,000-square-foot penthouse, it probably seemed like a closet. It suits me, I said simply. I don't need much space. Yes, I suppose that's practical on a teacher's salary. She patted my arm. We all admire how you manage on so little. It's quite brave, really. As Amber drifted away to join a group of family friends, I felt increasingly out of place. Had I ever truly belonged in this family? The only person who made me feel accepted was now lying in that expensive casket. Aunt Pamela cornered me next, her critical gaze taking in my simple black dress, appropriate but not designer. Rachel, dear, I've been meaning to speak with you about your future, she began, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. With Harold gone. Don't you think it's time to reconsider your position? There's always a place for you in the family business. Perhaps in community outreach? It would be a suitable use of your interests. I recognized the offer for what it was. Not an olive branch, but a collar. I'm happy with my teaching career, Aunt Pamela. But thank you for thinking of me. Her smile tightened. Well, the offer stands. Though I should mention that family support typically follows family participation. The threat was thinly veiled. Get in line or get cut off. Not that I received much family support anyway. As the reception wound down, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair approached me. He stood out from the other guests, not trying to network, just observing quietly. Miss Mitchell? I'm Lawrence Reynolds, your uncle's attorney. He handed me a business card. Harold spoke of you often and with great affection. Something in his respectful tone was refreshing after hours of condescension. You knew him well? I asked. For over 30 years. Reynolds confirmed. He was more than a client. I considered him a friend. Then you're one of the few people here who actually miss him, I said before I could stop myself. Reynolds' eyes crinkled slightly. Harold anticipated that the funeral would be an event rather than a remembrance. He glanced around the room before lowering his voice. I wonder if you might stop by my office tomorrow morning before the will reading? There are some matters Harold asked me to discuss with you privately. Confused but curious. I agreed to meet him at 9 the next morning. As Reynolds turned to leave, he slipped me a small envelope. Harold asked me to give you this today. Perhaps read it in private. As the final guests departed, I sat alone in my car in the funeral home parking lot and opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note card with Harold's familiar handwriting. Rachel, remember what I told you about living richly. The others have forgotten what that truly means. You haven't. Hold on to that tomorrow. Harold. I drove home with more questions than answers, wondering what exactly my uncle had planned from beyond the grave. Reynolds' law office occupied the top floor of a historic building in downtown Boston. Unlike the sleek, modern firms my father used, Reynolds and Associates had an old-world feel, wood paneling, leather-bound books, and furniture that valued comfort over impression. The receptionist, a woman about my mother's age, greeted me by name and immediately showed me to Reynolds' private office. Miss Mitchell, thank you for coming. Reynolds rose from behind a substantial oak desk. Please have a seat. Can I offer you coffee or tea? After declining refreshments, I settled into a leather chair. I'm curious why Uncle Harold wanted us to meet before the official reading. Reynolds nodded, opening a folder. Your uncle was a remarkably perceptive man, Miss Mitchell. He anticipated how today might unfold and wanted to prepare you. Prepare me for what? Harold had unconventional ideas about wealth and family. Reynolds chose his words carefully. Over the past 15 years, he made significant changes to his estate planning, based on what he called his ongoing character assessment of the Mitchell family. The experiment he mentioned, I murmured, remembering our last conversation. Precisely. Reynolds looked impressed. Harold confided in very few people about this. Essentially, he had been observing how wealth affected character, specifically how it affected his family members' characters. I'm not sure I understand. Reynolds leaned forward. Your uncle believed that inherited wealth without earned wisdom was destructive. He watched how family members treated others when no benefit to themselves was possible. He noted who gave genuine time versus performative donations. He tracked who maintained integrity versus who compromised values for advancement. I thought about the family's behavior just yesterday at the funeral. It doesn't sound like many passed his test. Harold was disappointed in most cases, Reynolds acknowledged, but not in all. He met my eyes directly. He spoke of you often, Miss Mitchell. Your choice to pursue teaching against family pressure impressed him deeply. Your dedication to your students, your modest lifestyle despite your background. Your authenticity. These things mattered to Harold. Uncomfortable with the praise, I shifted in my seat. I'm just living my life, according to your own values, not those imposed by wealth or status. That's precisely what Harold respected. Reynolds handed me a sealed envelope. This is from Harold. He asked that you read it before the will reading, but not in my presence. There's a small sitting room next door where you can have privacy. The adjacent room was cozy, with a window overlooking the Boston Common. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers to find several handwritten pages. My dear Rachel, if you're reading this, I've finally taken that last great adventure. Don't grieve too much. I've lived exactly as I wished, which is more than most can say. You've probably noticed I've been testing our family for years. It began after your grandfather died. I watched how quickly wealth corrupted values, how your father and Pamela transformed from idealistic young people into status-obsessed tycoons, how your siblings and cousins were raised to prioritize appearance over substance. I tried fighting it directly at first. Then I realized a more subtle approach was needed. I began creating situations to test character, opportunities to show compassion without reward, chances to stand on principle when it wasn't convenient. Moments where true values would reveal themselves. The results have been illuminating and, frankly, heartbreaking. People I once admired have repeatedly chosen status over integrity, wealth over connection, appearance over authenticity. But not you, Rachel. When you announced your intention to teach, I saw a spark of hope. I've followed your career closely, visiting your school anonymously, speaking with your principal, even sitting in on parent-teacher nights posing as a grandparent. I've watched you dedicate yourself to children who need you, living modestly but purposefully. What happens today at the will reading will shock the family. Some will be angry, others hurt. All will be surprised. Remember that my decisions weren't made lightly but after years of careful observation. You have something the others lost long ago, perspective on what truly matters. That's why I've chosen you. Not to punish them, but because I trust you to use what I'm leaving in ways aligned with genuine values. Stay strong today. You'll face pressure, perhaps even threats. Lawrence will help you navigate the legal aspects, but the emotional storm is yours to weather. I believe in you. Live richly, Rachel. Not with wealth alone, but with purpose. With love and confidence. Harold. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Though it answered some questions, it created new ones. What exactly had Harold done? What storm was coming? When I returned to Reynolds' office, he studied my expression. "Are you all right, Miss Mitchell?" "I think so," I said, wiping away tears. "But I still don't understand what's happening." "You will tomorrow," he replied. "Just remember what Harold valued most about you, your strength of character. You'll need it." As I left the building, I felt a strange mixture of grief, confusion, and foreboding. Whatever Harold had planned, it was clear tomorrow would change everything. The official reading of Harold Mitchell's last will and testament was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Reynolds' office, but family members began arriving by 1:30, milling around the elegant conference room like shareholders before an important vote. The space was impressive, a long mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs, with views of the Boston skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. I chose a seat near the back, watching as my relatives arranged themselves according to their perceived importance. My father and Aunt Pamela took positions at the head of the table, flanked by Garrett and Blake. Amber sat next to her husband, checking her phone periodically. Cousins, aunts, and uncles filled the remaining seats, all dressed impeccably, all speculating in hushed tones about what Harold might have left them. No one sat beside me. At precisely 2 o'clock, Lawrence Reynolds entered with 2 colleagues carrying stacks of documents. The room immediately quieted. "Good afternoon," Reynolds began. "We're gathered to execute the last will and testament of Harold Edward Mitchell. Before we proceed, I must note that Harold updated his will regularly, with the final version signed and notarized 6 months ago. All documents have been properly executed according to Massachusetts law." This last point seemed directed at my father, who frowned slightly. Clearly, he'd already been considering legal challenges. "I'll now read the will in its entirety," Reynolds continued, opening an impressive leather portfolio. The initial portions were standard legal language: revocation of previous wills, appointment of executors, payment of debts and taxes. Then came the bequests. To the Vermont Conservancy Trust, Harold left his cabin and surrounding 10 acres of woodland, with the stipulation that the property remain undeveloped and open for educational purposes. To his housekeeper of 15 years, Mrs. Eleanor Winters, he left $100,000 and his collection of first editions, a detail that made one of my cousins audibly huff. To his alma mater, Dartmouth College, he left $2 million for scholarships for students pursuing careers in education or environmental conservation. Then came the family bequests. To my father, Richard, Harold left his remaining shares in the Mitchell Hotel Group, approximately 15% of the company. My father nodded, having clearly expected this. It was the logical business decision, keeping ownership within the direct family line. To Aunt Pamela, Harold left the historic Mitchell family home in Massachusetts that he had inherited from their parents. Pamela smiled tightly, having coveted the property for decades. To Garrett, Harold left his collection of rare watches and his membership at the exclusive Brookline Country Club. My brother straightened his tie, appearing satisfied if not thrilled. To Amber, Harold left his vacation property in Aspen, a stunning 4-bedroom lodge worth several $1 million. My sister squeezed her husband's hand, already planning winter getaways. To Blake, Harold left his extensive art collection, featuring works by several contemporary artists whose values had increased dramatically since purchase. My cousin smiled broadly. He'd been eyeing those pieces for years. Various other relatives received smaller, but still substantial bequests: jewelry, specific antiques, monetary gifts ranging from $50,000 to $250,000. Reynolds methodically worked through the list while my family members exchanged pleased glances or occasional frowns, depending on their perceived winnings. I sat quietly, wondering if Harold had forgotten me entirely. Despite his letter, I'd received no mention yet. Part of me was hurt, but another part felt strangely peaceful. Harold had valued our relationship beyond material gifts, Perhaps that was legacy enough. Then Reynolds paused, turning to a new page. And to my niece, Rachel Elizabeth Mitchell, he began. The room quieted as all eyes turned to me. I sat up straighter, fighting the urge to fidget under their stares. I leave the sum of $1. A moment of stunned silence followed, broken first by a snort from my cousin, then by Garrett's barely suppressed laughter. Soon, half the room was exchanging amused glances or covering smiles with their hands. $1? My father repeated incredulously. That's correct, Reynolds confirmed. $1. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as the humiliation washed over me. $1. Less than Harold had left to charity, less than he'd left to distant acquaintances, less than the cost of the pen Reynolds was using to make notes. Well, Garrett said loudly enough for everyone to hear, that's about what she deserves. At least Uncle Harold recognized who truly valued the Mitchell legacy. Amber avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by her manicure. Blake looked embarrassed on my behalf, which somehow felt worse than the outright mockery. I stared at my hands, fighting back tears. Whatever I had expected, or not expected, this public humiliation hadn't been it. Had I misunderstood Harold's letter completely? Was this his way of saying I'd failed his test too? Reynolds cleared his throat, seemingly waiting for the snickers to subside before continuing. I considered standing and leaving. There seemed little point in enduring more of this. I began gathering my purse, planning a dignified exit. Before we conclude, Reynolds said, his voice suddenly louder and more commanding, there is one final matter to address. Something in his tone made me pause. The room quieted again, everyone assuming the formalities were nearly complete. Regarding the Swiss account number 7382915-03B at Banque Privée Genève and all associated holdings, Reynolds continued, his eyes scanning the room. Swiss account, my father interrupted. Frowning, what Swiss account? Reynolds continued as if he hadn't heard. Harold Mitchell maintained a private account in Switzerland for the past 22 years. This account currently holds liquid assets valued at approximately $53 million. A collective gasp filled the room. $53 million, separate from everything already distributed. My father half rose from his seat. Additionally, Reynolds pressed on. The account is connected to ownership of Boutique Hospitality Group, a privately held company operating 8 luxury boutique hotels across Europe, with a current market valuation of approximately $45 million. Almost $100 million in hidden assets. The room erupted in murmurs. Aunt Pamela was whispering furiously to my father. Garrett had gone completely still, his expression unreadable. Reynolds raised his voice again. According to Harold Mitchell's explicit instructions, both the Swiss account and complete ownership of Boutique Hospitality Group are to pass in their entirety to Rachel Elizabeth Mitchell, with no conditions or restrictions. The silence that followed was absolute. I felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. Every eye turned to me. Expressions transformed from mockery to shock and emerging anger. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what I'd just heard. Reynolds continued reading from the document. I quote directly from Harold Mitchell's instructions. The $1 bequest mentioned previously was intentional, as was its placement in the will. I wish to observe the true character of my family one final time. The remainder of my estate, the most substantial portion by far, I leave to the only Mitchell who has demonstrated the values I truly respect: integrity, compassion, and the courage to live according to her own principles rather than the expectations of others. My father found his voice first. This is preposterous. Harold was not in his right mind. We'll contest this immediately. Reynolds seemed prepared for this reaction. Mr. Mitchell anticipated such a response. Therefore, he recorded a video statement explaining his decisions, executed in the presence of 2 physicians who certified his mental competence, as well as 3 separate attorneys, including myself. The documentation is extensive and, I assure you, legally unassailable. From a briefcase, Reynolds produced a tablet and placed it on the table. Would you like to view the video now, or shall we continue with the formal proceedings? My father glanced at his own attorney, who gave a slight nod. Play it, he said tersely. Reynolds tapped the screen, and suddenly Uncle Harold was there, thin but alert. His eyes bright with the intelligence I remembered. Hello, family, he began. If you're watching this, the will reading has reached its dramatic conclusion. I apologize for the theatrics, but after a lifetime of observing the Mitchell family dynamics, I felt a final lesson was in order. Harold shifted in his seat, leaning forward. For decades, I've watched wealth corrode the values our parents instilled in us. I've seen how the pursuit of more money, more status, more power, has never satisfied but only increased the hunger. I've observed how family members are valued for their contributions to the Mitchell image rather than their character. His gaze seemed to move across the room, as if he could see each person's reaction. To be clear, I am of sound mind and body. I've made these decisions deliberately, after years of careful consideration. I've left substantial bequests to many family members, more than enough for comfortable lives. But the bulk of my personal fortune, earned separately from the family business through my own investments, I leave to Rachel. My uncle's expression softened. Rachel chose a path of service rather than accumulation. When mocked for her choices, she remained true to her convictions. When offered easier paths, she chose meaning over money. In short, she has demonstrated wisdom about what truly constitutes a rich life, something the rest of the family has forgotten. Harold straightened, his voice growing firmer. There are conditions to Rachel's inheritance, though not the kind that can be legally enforced. Rachel, I ask that you use these resources wisely. Consider creating a foundation focused on education. Perhaps develop the boutique hotels in ways that benefit the communities they serve. Most importantly, don't let this wealth change who you are or what you value. He smiled then, the familiar warm smile I'd missed. To the rest of the family, I encourage you to reflect on why I've made these choices. Wealth without purpose is a burden, not a blessing. Perhaps in time, you'll understand that Rachel's inheritance isn't about money, but about recognizing the values that truly matter. The video ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Reynolds cleared his throat. There are additional documents for Miss Mitchell to review privately regarding the transfer of assets. For now, this concludes the formal reading of Harold Mitchell's will. What followed was chaos. My father and Garrett immediately huddled with their attorney. Aunt Pamela approached Reynolds, voice rising as she demanded to see documentation of Harold's mental evaluations. Blake stared at me with an unreadable expression while Amber suddenly appeared at my side, arm around my shoulders as if we'd always been the closest of sisters. Ratch, this is incredible, she gushed. We should celebrate. I always told everyone how amazing your teaching work is. I gently extracted myself from her embrace, still in shock. Reynolds appeared beside me, guiding me toward a side door. Miss Mitchell, I suggest we continue our discussion in my private office, he said quietly. There are security concerns to address, as well as immediate financial matters requiring your attention. As he led me from the room, I heard my father's voice rising. This will not stand. Harold was clearly manipulated. We'll fight this all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. In Reynolds' office, the attorney closed the door against the commotion and gestured for me to sit. Your uncle anticipated the family's reaction. He prepared extensively for legal challenges, which I believe will ultimately prove futile, though potentially unpleasant. I finally found my voice. Why didn't he tell me? Reynolds considered this. Harold believed that knowing about the inheritance might change your path. He wanted you to continue making decisions based on your values, not in anticipation of wealth. I don't know anything about running hotels or managing that kind of money, I said, feeling overwhelmed. Harold has arranged for a transition team of trusted executives to continue day-to-day operations of the hotel group. As for the financial aspects, my firm can assist until you decide on permanent advisors. Reynolds smiled slightly. Your uncle had great faith in your judgment, Miss Mitchell. He believed you would rise to the occasion. As the reality began sinking in, Reynolds added, I should mention that Harold established a security protocol. Given the substantial nature of the inheritance and the family's reaction, he recommended temporary relocation to a secure location while the initial legal matters are settled. Looking out the window at my angry family members gathering on the sidewalk below, I realized my life had irrevocably changed. For better or worse remained to be seen. The week following the will reading passed in a blur. On Reynolds' advice, I checked into a suite at the Four Seasons under a different name while security professionals assessed threats and monitored the situation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hiding in a luxury hotel that competed directly with my family's business. My phone exploded with messages. I turned it off after the first day, instructing Reynolds to field urgent communications. When I finally reviewed the messages 3 days later, the pattern was clear. Relatives who had smirked at my $1 inheritance were now my biggest supporters. Former family critics suddenly remembered how they'd always admired my independent spirit. Most transparent was Amber, who left 17 increasingly desperate voice messages. Rachel, darling, call me back. I'm worried about you. We need to discuss the foundation Harold mentioned. I have so many PR ideas. Family dinner at our penthouse? Just to talk things through. By contrast, my father and Garrett took a different approach. Their messages were thinly veiled threats. This will destroy the family. I hope you can live with that. Dad, you have no idea what you're doing. The hotels will fail without proper Mitchell management. Garrett. On the 5th day, Reynolds arranged for me to access the executive offices of Boutique Hospitality Group's Boston satellite location. There, I met with Harold's management team, professionals who had quietly run the European hotel chain under his ownership. Harold was a remarkable owner, explained Sophia Bergman, the operations director. He provided resources and vision, but trusted us to execute. The boutique properties are all profitable, with strong local connections and exceptional customer loyalty. I spend hours reviewing financials, organizational structures, and property details. Unlike the Mitchell hotels, which were standardized for consistent branding, each of Harold's boutique properties had unique character, emphasizing local culture and sustainability. They employed local residents at fair wages and sourced from regional producers. They were profitable not despite these practices, but because of them, attracting travelers seeking authentic experiences over corporate predictability. These are beautiful, I said, looking through photos of the properties. I had no idea Harold was building something like this. He was very private about his ownership, Sophia explained. He said mixing business with family created the wrong incentives. That evening, Reynolds delivered a package to my hotel suite, Harold's personal journal covering the last 5 years of his life. Reading it was like having one final conversation with my uncle. The entries detailed his thinking about wealth, family, and legacy. He documented specific incidents that had shaped his opinion of various family members. Richard declined to fund employee healthcare improvements despite record profits. Shareholders come first, he said. The shareholders are primarily family members already worth millions. Profit above people, always the wrong choice. Observed Garrett firing a hotel manager who refused to hide evidence of bedbugs in the Chicago property. Integrity sacrificed for quarterly numbers. Pamela orchestrated the exclusion of Cousin David's gay partner from the family Christmas party. When confronted, she cited traditional values as if cruelty could ever be a value. But there were entries about me too. Visited Rachel's school incognito today. Watched her stay 3 hours after dismissal helping a struggling student with reading. No audience. No recognition, no financial incentive, just genuine commitment to a child's success. This is true wealth of character. By the seventh day, I felt ready to face the family. Reynolds arranged a meeting at his office with enhanced security present. I arrived early, rehearsing what I would say, knowing this confrontation would set the tone for everything that followed. They arrived as a unified front: my father, Pamela, Garrett, Blake, and Amber. Their expressions ranged from barely contained anger to calculated friendliness. Rachel. My father began after tense greetings. We need to discuss how to move forward sensibly. This situation has created unnecessary division. Division existed long before Harold's will. I replied calmly. It just wasn't acknowledged. Garrett leaned forward. Let's be direct. Harold made a mistake. He wasn't thinking clearly about the business implications. The Mitchell name and the hotel business should remain unified under experienced management. You mean your management, I clarified. I mean people who understand the industry, he snapped. Not elementary school teachers. Amber jumped in with her practiced smile. What Garrett means is that we can help. We could structure a partnership where you maintain ownership, but delegate operations to the family. We'd protect your interests while integrating the boutique properties into the Mitchell portfolio. Absorption, not integration, I noted. Harold built something different intentionally. Blake, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. Rachel, I've run the European division for years. I know those markets. Let me at least advise you on the boutique properties. We could work together. Each proposal had the same subtext. Let us control what Harold left you. None acknowledged the deeper message of his bequest. My father, seeing the conversation wasn't progressing as planned, changed tactics. If you insist on the separation, we'll have no choice but to challenge the will. Harold wasn't competent near the end. We have witnesses who will testify to his declining mental state. Witnesses who stand to gain financially if the will is overturned, Reynolds interjected. Hardly impartial testimony. This will get ugly, my father warned. Family matters should be handled privately, not in court. Think about what this publicity will do to the Mitchell name, to your name. I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about Harold's message, not just his money. He saw something happening to this family that troubled him deeply. Money became the measure of everything: success, worth, even love. He wanted to break that pattern. Philosophical nonsense, Aunt Pamela dismissed. Harold always had impractical ideas. Ideas like treating employees fairly, valuing character over appearance, measuring success by impact rather than acquisition. I shook my head. Those don't seem impractical to me. I stood, feeling suddenly clear about my path forward. I won't be contesting the will or transferring control of the assets Harold entrusted to me. I will, however, make you an offer. Their expressions shifted to cautious interest. Harold mentioned a foundation focused on education. I intend to create it, using a significant portion of the liquid assets. The foundation will need leadership in various capacities: finance, operations, public relations. Those positions could be available to family members. You're offering us jobs? Garrett asked incredulously. I'm offering purpose, I corrected. Meaningful work advancing education for underserved communities. Competitive compensation, but not ownership or control. The foundation will operate according to specific values, the values Harold believed in. The reactions were predictable. My father and Garrett immediately rejected the idea as insulting. Pamela called it naive. Blake looked thoughtful but non-committal. Only Amber showed genuine interest, seeing perhaps the PR potential if nothing else. The offer remains open, I said as the meeting concluded. Not because I need your help, but because Harold wanted his legacy to heal the family, not divide it further. This is the path forward I'm choosing, aligned with his values and my own. As they left, Reynolds nodded approvingly. Harold would be proud. You stood your ground while offering reconciliation on principled terms. Will they accept? I asked. Some might, eventually. Others never will. He gathered his papers. The question is whether you're prepared for the long journey ahead. Family healing, when it happens at all, rarely comes quickly. I thought about Harold's journal, about his patient. Years-long observation of character. I can be patient, I decided. I learned from the best. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined. The initial shock of inheritance gave way to a profound sense of responsibility. Harold hadn't just left me wealth. He'd left me his vision of what wealth could accomplish when guided by clear values. With Reynolds' guidance, I established the Harold Mitchell Education Foundation with an initial endowment of $30 million. We focused on 3 core initiatives: teacher development in underserved communities, innovative curriculum design, and scholarship programs for first-generation college students pursuing education degrees. The foundation offices occupied a renovated historic building in downtown Boston, warm, welcoming spaces that encouraged collaboration rather than hierarchy. I hired experienced nonprofit leaders, but maintained an active role in shaping direction and priorities. And yes, I kept teaching part-time at my elementary school. The children's straightforward enthusiasm kept me grounded amid the complexities of my new responsibilities. Family reactions evolved in unexpected ways. My father and Aunt Pamela maintained their distance, pursuing legal challenges that Reynolds handily defeated. They sent birthday and Christmas cards with formal, impersonal messages, acknowledging my existence without accepting my choices. Garrett surprised everyone. After his initial anger subsided, he approached me with an unexpected proposal: a Mitchell Hotel Group partnership with the foundation to develop affordable housing for hospitality workers. I've been thinking about what Harold said, he admitted grudgingly. About purpose beyond profit. Maybe there's something to it. His project became the foundation's first major initiative outside education, providing stable housing for hotel employees who often couldn't afford to live near their workplaces. Garrett remained competitive and profit-focused, but our cautious collaboration revealed a capacity for growth I hadn't recognized in my brother. Amber eventually accepted a position directing communications for the foundation. Though initially attracted by the title and visibility, she gradually embraced the mission, applying her considerable social skills to build authentic community partnerships rather than superficial photo opportunities. I never realized how exhausting it was. She confided one evening after a successful fundraiser, always maintaining the perfect image, never being quite good enough. For whom? I asked. For all of them, she said, gesturing vaguely toward the family power structure. For the first time, I feel like my work matters beyond appearances. Blake chose a different path, remaining with the Mitchell Hotel Group but visiting occasionally to offer genuinely helpful advice about the European boutique properties. I respect what you're doing, he told me. It's not my path, but I see its value. The boutique hotels flourished under the balanced approach Harold had established: profit with purpose, luxury with responsibility. I visited each property, learning from local managers rather than imposing standardized solutions. We expanded sustainability initiatives and community integration programs, attracting guests who shared these values. 3 cousins and an aunt eventually joined foundation initiatives, finding satisfaction in purpose-driven work. Others maintained distance, uncomfortable with the challenge to family orthodoxy. Holiday gatherings became smaller but somehow more genuine. In September, I traveled to Switzerland, visiting the bank where Harold had quietly built his separate fortune. The private banker who had worked with him for decades shared stories of my uncle's methodical approach to wealth. He was unusual among our clients, Mr. Bergman explained. Most focus exclusively on growth. Harold insisted on alignment with values, refusing investments in certain industries regardless of potential returns, demanding accountability from companies, directing profits toward community benefit. From Switzerland, I visited Harold's favorite boutique property, a converted monastery in the Alps that balanced historic preservation with modern comfort. Sitting on the terrace overlooking snow-capped mountains, I finally felt I understood what Harold had tried to teach me. Wealth itself was neither virtue nor vice. What mattered was consciousness, the awareness that resources created both opportunity and obligation. Harold hadn't rejected wealth. He'd rejected wealth without purpose. Accumulation without meaning. Privilege without responsibility. Back in Boston, I established a scholarship program in Harold's name at my school, funding enrichment opportunities for children with limited resources. I donated to the arts program at the Vermont Conservancy, where Harold's cabin now served as an environmental education center. Small actions compared to the foundation's broader work, but personally meaningful connections to his legacy. The legal challenges finally ended in November when the Massachusetts Supreme Court declined to hear my father's appeal. Reynolds called with the news, then asked a surprising question. "Have you found purpose in all this, Rachel? Beyond honoring Harold's wishes?" I considered this carefully. I've found that wealth magnifies who you already are. If you valued connection before, you'll create more meaningful connections. If you prioritize status, you'll pursue more elaborate status. The money doesn't change your character. It reveals and amplifies it. That's precisely what Harold believed, Reynolds said. It's why he chose you. As the year anniversary of the will reading approached, I invited the entire family to an open house at the foundation. Some came, some didn't. Those who attended saw the tangible results of our work, teacher training programs showing measurable improvements in student outcomes, scholarship recipients pursuing their dreams, housing initiatives transforming lives. My father attended briefly, maintaining formal politeness. As he prepared to leave, he paused. "Harold always saw things differently," he said. The closest he'd come to acknowledging the validity of my uncle's choices. "He saw things clearly," I corrected gently. "He just measured success differently." My father nodded once before departing. Not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. That evening, alone in my office, I read Harold's letter one final time before placing it in the foundation archives. His words felt different now, less a directive and more a conversation continuing across time. He had given me far more than money. He'd offered a different perspective on wealth itself, not as an end, but as a means to create meaning. I still lived in my modest apartment, though I'd finally replaced the failing refrigerator and creaky bed frame. I drove the same car, wore similar clothes, maintained friendships with fellow teachers. The profound changes weren't external, but internal, a deepened sense of purpose, expanded vision of possibility, and strengthened commitment to living according to my own values rather than others' expectations. "Thank you, Uncle Harold," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm living richly, just as you hoped." What would your legacy be if unexpected wealth came your way? Would it change who you are or simply amplify your existing values? Drop a comment below sharing how you'd use sudden resources to create meaning. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more tales of transformation. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by how richly you live according to your deepest values. My name is Stephanie Walker, and at 34, I thought I had the perfect life. 10 years of marriage to Michael, my dream home in Seattle, a successful career. Then one day, I opened our bedroom door and found my husband in bed with my sister Megan. The divorce was brutal. I cut all ties with my family. 6 months later, I turned on my phone to find 100 missed calls from Michael. Those calls revealed a truth that changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how betrayal led to my freedom. Before my world shattered, I had built a life I was proud of in Seattle. I worked as a marketing executive for a tech company, climbing the corporate ladder through determination and late nights. My career was thriving, and I loved the creative challenges of marketing campaigns and strategy sessions. The corner office with a view of Puget Sound felt like a testament to my hard work. Growing up in Portland, my younger sister Megan and I had been close despite a 4-year age gap. I helped her with homework, taught her how to apply makeup, and defended her against mean girls at school. When she followed me to Seattle after college, I was thrilled to have family nearby. We spent weekends exploring the city, hiking nearby trails, and establishing our adult relationship. I never imagined she would become the architect of my heartbreak. I met Michael Reynolds at my college friend Laura's wedding. He was the best man, and I was a bridesmaid. During the reception, he asked me to dance just as the band played my favorite song. His confident smile and the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room made my heart race. We talked until the venue closed, exchanging numbers and promising to meet again. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant overlooking the water. Michael ordered wine without checking the menu and somehow selected my favorite. He listened intently as I talked about my ambitions, laughing at the right moments and asking thoughtful questions. By dessert, I was already imagining a future together. The romance moved quickly. After 8 months of dating, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Vancouver. He arranged a private dinner on a rooftop overlooking the city, dropping to one knee just as fireworks lit up the sky. It felt like a scene from a movie. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of as a little girl. 300 guests gathered at a historic estate outside Seattle. I wore an off-shoulder lace gown that made me feel like royalty. Megan stood beside me as my maid of honor, helping arrange my train before I walked down the aisle. During her speech, she tearfully described how she hoped to find a love like mine someday. The irony of those words would haunt me years later. The first 3 years of marriage were blissful. Michael and I purchased a craftsman-style house in a desirable neighborhood, spending weekends painting walls and shopping for furniture. We hosted dinner parties where guests commented on our obvious happiness. We traveled to Europe, posting enviable photos from the Amalfi Coast and Paris. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. At work, I became close friends with Ashley Davidson, our lead graphic designer. She was the first to notice subtle changes in Michael's behavior. During a company holiday party, she observed how he barely acknowledged me while charming everyone else in the room. "Does Michael always check his phone that much when you're out together?" she asked as we refilled our wine glasses. I dismissed her concern. "He has demanding clients. Financial advising never really stops." Michael's career as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm meant irregular hours and frequent client dinners. When late nights became the norm rather than the exception, I accepted his explanations about market fluctuations and client emergencies. I prided myself on being an understanding wife. Family dynamics complicated matters in ways I didn't recognize at the time. My parents, Robert and Linda, had always favored Megan. As the younger child, she received more attention, more praise, and more forgiveness for mistakes. When she crashed her first car, they bought her a newer model. When I graduated with honors, they barely acknowledged it because Megan had just been accepted to college. I had accepted this imbalance as normal, never realizing how it shaped Megan's view of what she deserved in life. Looking back, I can see how Megan had always competed with me. When I joined the swim team in high school, she suddenly developed an interest in swimming. When I dated the quarterback senior year, she befriended his younger brother. These patterns continued into adulthood, but I interpreted them as admiration rather than envy. Warning signs appeared early in my marriage that I expertly rationalized away. The time I found a long blonde hair on Michael's jacket that was clearly not mine, I convinced myself it belonged to his new assistant. When he missed our 4th anniversary dinner because of a client emergency but returned home smelling of alcohol rather than food, I believed his story about closing a deal at a bar. The lipstick smudge on his collar 6 months later was dismissed as an accident from hugging his mother goodbye after Sunday brunch. Megan inserted herself into our lives more aggressively after her breakup with her long-term boyfriend Jason. She began stopping by our house unannounced, often when she knew I would be working late. She called Michael directly rather than going through me to make plans. At the time, I appreciated that my sister and husband got along so well. I never imagined their bond was forming at my expense. The first concrete evidence that something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Michael had left his phone on the kitchen counter while showering. A notification appeared from a contact listed simply as M, with a message that read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow." My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, but it was locked with a passcode I didn't know. When had Michael started locking his phone? I placed it back exactly where I'd found it, heart racing, and pretended to be reading when he emerged from the bathroom. 2 weeks later, Michael informed me he needed to attend a financial conference in San Diego. He packed meticulously, including his best suits and the expensive cologne I had given him for Christmas. The morning after his supposed departure, I called his hotel on a whim, only to be told no Michael Reynolds was registered as a guest. That evening, he called from what he claimed was his hotel room, describing the conference sessions and ocean view. I listened silently, each word cementing the reality that my husband was lying to my face. "How was the keynote speaker?" I asked, testing him. "Brilliant. Talked about emerging markets for nearly 2 hours," he replied without hesitation. When he returned 3 days later, tanned and relaxed, I confronted him with what I knew. "There was no conference in San Diego, Michael. Where were you really?" His expression shifted from surprise to anger so quickly it startled me. "Are you spying on me now?" The conference was moved to Los Angeles at the last minute. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd make a big deal about it like you're doing right now." His explanation had enough plausibility that I found myself apologizing for doubting him. Later, I would recognize this as classic gaslighting, but in the moment, I felt like the unreasonable one. The following week, I met Ashley for lunch and confided my suspicions. "Something doesn't feel right, but whenever I bring it up, Michael makes me feel crazy." Ashley put down her fork and looked at me intently. "Stephanie, trust your instincts. They're usually right." That evening, Megan called and invited herself over for dinner. As we ate, I mentioned my concerns in vague terms, hoping for sisterly support. "Michael works so hard," Megan responded, swirling her wine. "Men like him need space sometimes. You can be a bit controlling." "Steph." Her defense of Michael struck me as odd, but I chalked it up to her general tendency to play devil's advocate. A month later, while doing laundry, I discovered a faint perfume on Michael's dress shirts that wasn't mine. The scent was distinctive, floral with vanilla undertones. I recognized it as Megan's signature fragrance, but convinced myself he had simply hugged her during one of her frequent visits. As tensions grew, I suggested marriage counseling. Michael reluctantly agreed, but sabotaged our sessions by arriving late, answering texts during our time, or dismissing the therapist's suggestions as new age nonsense. After 3 appointments, he refused to return. "There's nothing wrong with our marriage that you being less paranoid wouldn't fix," he snapped when I pressed the issue. Around this time, Michael became obsessively protective of his devices. He changed all his passwords, took his phone into the bathroom when showering, and kept his laptop in a locked briefcase. When I questioned this behavior, he accused me of invading his privacy. My 34th birthday arrived during this period of growing suspicion. Michael had always made my birthday special, but this time he texted at 6 p.m. saying he was stuck with a client and would miss the dinner reservation he'd made. I sat alone at an expensive restaurant, making excuses to the sympathetic waiter about my absent husband. When I returned home, there was no sign of Michael, no gift, not even a card. The emotional distance between us expanded into a chasm. Physical intimacy became rare, with Michael always too tired or stressed. Conversations consisted of logistical planning rather than meaningful exchange. When I attempted to discuss our relationship, he would find reasons to leave the room or the house entirely. Desperate for perspective, I called my parents. Their response left me cold. "Marriage has ups and downs, Stephanie," my mother said dismissively. "Michael is a good provider. Don't rock the boat over what's probably nothing." My father was even more blunt. "You always were the dramatic one. Not everything is about you." Meanwhile, Megan's presence in our home increased whenever I worked late. She offered to drop off dinner for Michael or help with household tasks I was too busy to handle. Her gestures seemed kind on the surface, but a growing unease settled in my stomach. The stress began affecting my work performance. Presentations lacked my usual polish. I missed deadlines and forgot important client details. My boss noticed, calling me into his office for a conversation about my recent distraction. The breaking point of this phase came when I experienced my first panic attack. During a crucial client meeting, my heart began racing uncontrollably. Sweat beaded on my forehead as the room seemed to tilt sideways. I excused myself and barely made it to the bathroom before collapsing against the wall, gasping for breath. Ashley found me there 20 minutes later, curled on the floor, convinced I was dying. "I think you're having a panic attack," she said, sitting beside me and holding my hand. "My sister gets these. Just breathe with me, slowly." As my breathing normalized, a terrible clarity washed over me. My body was sending signals my mind had been ignoring. Something was very wrong in my marriage, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. The next 6 months became an exercise in gathering evidence while watching my marriage disintegrate. Each new discovery was another knife in my heart, but I needed to know the full truth. Against Ashley's advice, I hired a private investigator named David. The decision felt extreme, but Michael's secretive behavior left me few alternatives. David was a former police detective with kind eyes that had seen too much human weakness. He took detailed notes during our initial meeting, asking questions I found difficult to answer about our finances, schedules, and relationships. "Don't confront him with anything you discover until you're ready to act on it," David cautioned. People who are caught often become unpredictable. 2 weeks later, David provided my first concrete evidence. Credit card statements showed Michael had purchased jewelry from Tiffany, items I had never received. A diamond bracelet worth $3,800. A pair of sapphire earrings that cost nearly $2,500. Gifts for someone, but not his wife. The statements also revealed hotel charges in Seattle, sometimes just miles from our home. The pattern was always the same: room service for 2, premium champagne. Check out late the following morning. All while I believed Michael was working late or traveling for business. Meanwhile, Megan's lifestyle underwent a puzzling upgrade. My sister, who had always struggled financially as a freelance graphic designer, suddenly wore designer clothes and had her hair done at an exclusive salon. When I complimented her new Gucci handbag, she vaguely mentioned picking up some lucrative new clients. A family dinner at my parents' house became the stage for another disturbing revelation. As we ate dessert, I noticed intimate glances between Michael and Megan. It wasn't obvious enough that others would notice, but there was a silent communication happening across the table. When Michael excused himself to take a phone call, Megan followed moments later, claiming she needed something from her car. They both returned 15 minutes later. Slightly flushed and avoiding eye contact, my health began deteriorating under the weight of suspicion and betrayal. Insomnia became my nightly companion. I would lie awake beside Michael, listening to his peaceful breathing and wondering who he was dreaming about. I lost 15 pounds in 2 months, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. Dark circles under my eyes became permanent features, requiring increasing amounts of concealer to hide. Ashley grew increasingly concerned about my well-being. One evening over takeout in my office, she made a suggestion. "You need concrete proof," Stephanie, let me help you set up security cameras in your house. The idea of surveilling my own home felt surreal, but I agreed. The following weekend, while Michael attended a golf retreat, Ashley and I installed discrete cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. I deliberately avoided our bedroom, still clinging to some boundary I wasn't ready to cross. As evidence mounted, Michael's behavior toward me worsened. Comments about my appearance became cutting. "You might want to put some effort in," he remarked one morning as I prepared for work. "You look exhausted all the time now." When I cooked dinner, he found fault with the seasoning or temperature. Conversations became minefields where my words were twisted and used against me. One rainy afternoon while Michael showered, I discovered a second phone hidden in the pocket of his rarely worn winter coat. The device was basic, not the latest iPhone he carried publicly. When confronted, he claimed it was a work phone for high-profile clients who needed direct access. "Why haven't I ever seen it before?" I asked, holding the phone just out of his reach. "Because it's none of your business," he snapped, snatching it from my hand. "My clients expect confidentiality. Not everything in my life has to be shared with you." That night, he slept in the guest room, claiming my interrogations made it impossible to rest beside me. The next morning, he left for work without saying goodbye. As my suspicions grew, so did my parents' dismissal of them. During a tearful phone call with my mother, I shared my fears about Michael's fidelity. "You've always been jealous of what others have, Stephanie," she said with a sigh. "First your sister's natural beauty, now your husband's success. Perhaps you should talk to someone about these insecurities." My father was even more direct when I called him separately. "Michael is the best thing that ever happened to you. Don't drive him away with these wild accusations." Their responses left me feeling more alone than ever, unaware that they were already choosing sides in a battle I didn't yet know I was fighting. Michael's gaslighting reached new heights when he suggested I seek psychiatric help. After finding a receipt for a hotel room in his jacket, I confronted him over breakfast. "I think you're having some kind of breakdown," he said calmly, buttering his toast as if discussing the weather. "These delusions about affairs and secret phones aren't healthy." Dr. Richards specializes in paranoid disorders. "I've taken the liberty of making you an appointment." For a moment, I almost believed him. Perhaps I was losing my mind. Perhaps the evidence I'd gathered was simply coincidental. The doubt he planted was so powerful that I actually wrote down Dr. Richards' information. That afternoon, David the investigator called with news that snapped me back to reality. He had photographic evidence of Michael entering a hotel with a woman. Though the images weren't clear enough to identify her conclusively, the height and hair color matched Megan's exactly. That evening, I began documenting everything for what I now realized would be an inevitable divorce. I created a secure email account where I forwarded financial records, photographs, and investigator reports. I consulted with a divorce attorney quietly, understanding that preparation would be my only advantage in the coming storm. The weight of these secrets was crushing, but I wasn't ready to confront Michael until I had irrefutable proof. That proof would come sooner and more devastatingly than I could have imagined. The day that changed everything began ordinarily enough. I was scheduled to fly to Chicago for a 3-day marketing conference, my suitcase packed and waiting by the door. Michael seemed almost cheerful as he kissed me goodbye, promising to hold down the fort while I was away. Just as my Uber arrived to take me to the airport, my phone rang. The conference organizer apologetically informed me that the event had been postponed due to a severe weather system moving into Chicago. All flights were being canceled, and the conference would be rescheduled for the following month. I dismissed the Uber and brought my suitcase back inside, initially disappointed about the professional opportunity lost. Then a thought occurred to me. Michael didn't know my trip had been canceled. For once, I had the element of surprise. Instead of calling to tell him I was staying home, I decided to take a personal day. I spent the morning at a spa, enjoying my first massage in months and allowing myself a few hours of peace. As afternoon approached, I thought about surprising Michael with dinner from our favorite restaurant. Perhaps away from the tension that had built in our home, we could have an honest conversation about our marriage. I stopped at Giovanni's and ordered all of Michael's favorites, osso buco, truffle risotto, and tiramisu for dessert. The owner, who knew us as regulars, seemed pleased to see me looking more relaxed than I had in recent visits. "Marriage is hard work," he said while packaging my order. "But good food helps everything, no?" I drove home with a strange mix of hope and dread settling in my stomach. The house came into view, and I noticed two vehicles in the driveway: Michael's Audi and a familiar white Volkswagen that belonged to Megan. My sister was supposedly in Portland visiting our parents this week. At least, that's what she had told me over text yesterday. I parked on the street and approached the house quietly, food forgotten in the car. Using my key, I opened the front door as gently as possible. The house was silent except for faint music coming from upstairs. I slipped off my shoes and moved toward the staircase, each step careful and deliberate. As I reached the landing, I heard it. Laughter, Megan's distinctive giggle followed by Michael's deeper chuckle. Then silence, replaced by sounds that made my blood run cold. The intimacy was unmistakable, coming from behind our bedroom door. I stood frozen, a statue of a woman witnessing her world collapse. Part of me wanted to run, to pretend I hadn't heard anything, to cling to the remains of my marriage for a little longer. But a stronger voice inside pushed me forward. I deserved to know the truth, to see it with my own eyes. With a steady hand that belied the earthquake inside me, I pushed open the bedroom door. The scene branded itself into my memory in excruciating detail. Michael and Megan in our bed, tangled in sheets I had purchased during our anniversary trip to New York. My sister's clothes scattered across the floor, mingling with my husband's. Their expressions as they registered my presence. Shock, then guilt on Michael's face. Shock, then something almost like triumph on Megan's. "Stephanie." Michael scrambled to cover himself, nearly falling out of the bed in his panic. "This isn't." "I can explain." "Explain what exactly?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears, eerily calm. "How you're sleeping with my sister in our bed. Please enlighten me." Megan made no move to cover herself, instead sitting up with the sheet barely draped across her body. Well, this is awkward timing. The casualness of her response ignited something in me. "How long has this been happening?" Michael started to speak, but Megan cut him off with a laugh that chilled me to the bone. 3 years, if you want the truth. Started at your anniversary party. Remember when you couldn't find either of us for an hour? Now you know why. 3 years. While I planned vacations, cooked meals, and built a life with my husband, he had been betraying me with my own sister. The timeline crashed through my mind. 3 years meant they were together before our fertility treatments, before we put a down payment on the lake house, before I nursed Michael through pneumonia last winter. "You were never going to be enough for him," Megan continued, seemingly enjoying my pain. "You're too focused on your career, too controlling. Michael needs someone who puts him first." Michael finally found his voice. "Stephanie, it just happened. We never meant to hurt you." "Just happened?" "For 3 years. I was surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Did it just happen when you took her to the hotel downtown last month? Or when you bought her the sapphire earrings she's wearing right now, from our joint account?" Their expressions confirmed what the investigator had already told me. I pulled out my phone and called the 2 people who should have been my strongest supporters. "Mom, Dad, I need you to come over right now. I just found Michael in bed with Megan. I'm not leaving until you see this for yourselves." They arrived 20 minutes later, during which time Michael and Megan had dressed and moved to the living room. I sat in a chair opposite them, not trusting myself to speak further. When my parents entered, their expressions shifted from concern to discomfort as they assessed the situation. "What's going on here?" my father demanded, looking between the 3 of us. "I came home early from my trip and found them in bed together," I stated flatly. "Megan says it's been going on for 3 years." I expected shock. outrage on my behalf, parental protection that had been absent throughout my adulthood. Instead, my mother sighed heavily and sat beside Megan, who had begun crying on cue. "These things are complicated, Stephanie," she began, as if explaining something to a child. "Marriages go through difficulties. Perhaps if you had been more attentive." The implication hung in the air. This was somehow my fault. My father cleared his throat. "Let's not make rash decisions. This can be worked through if everyone is willing." It became horrifyingly clear that they were attempting to smooth over my husband's affair with their younger daughter. The betrayal expanded beyond Michael and Megan to include the two people who should have protected me from exactly this kind of pain. Something inside me shattered in that moment. The final thread connecting me to these people who shared my blood, but not my values. A strange calm settled over me as I realized I was truly alone in this room of 5 people. I stood up, gathering my purse and keys. "I'm going to a hotel. Michael, you have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from this house. It's in my name, as you may recall, since your credit was too poor for the mortgage." "You're overreacting," my mother protested. "Family should stick together through everything." I looked at her. Really looked at her perhaps for the first time in my adult life. "Is that what you taught Megan? That family sticks together while sleeping with each other's spouses?" Without waiting for a response, I walked out the door and drove to the nearest hotel, checking in with mechanical efficiency. In the anonymous quiet of room 347, I finally allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of what had happened. The sobs came like violent waves, bending me double on the generic floral bedspread. I cried until no more tears would come, until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. At midnight, a gentle knock at my door revealed Ashley, concern etched on her face. "You called and then didn't answer any of my texts," she explained, holding up a bag from the drugstore. "I brought reinforcements. Ice cream, pain relievers, and those face mask things you like." She sat with me as I recounted the whole horrific scene. Not interrupting, just passing tissues when needed. "What now?" she finally asked as dawn broke through the thin hotel curtains. I took a deep breath, surprised to find it came easier than expected. Now I become someone new. Someone without a cheating husband or a backstabbing sister or parents who enable them both. As sunlight filled the room, I felt the first flickering of something unexpected, relief. The suspicion, the gaslighting, the second-guessing was over. The truth, however painful, had set me free. The morning after discovery, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years, then searched online for divorce attorneys. Jennifer Patel had exceptional reviews specifically mentioning experience with infidelity cases. Her office squeezed me in that afternoon, understanding the urgency of my situation. Jennifer's office projected both warmth and competence, with credentials displayed alongside family photos. She listened without interruption as I detailed my marriage's collapse, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions about assets and timeline. "Washington is a no-fault divorce state," she explained once I'd finished. "But infidelity can influence property division and spousal support, especially with the evidence you've gathered." I signed the retainer agreement before leaving her office, a strange mixture of grief and determination propelling me forward. That evening, I returned home to find Michael had indeed removed some clothing but little else. "We need to talk," he insisted, blocking my path to the bedroom. "This doesn't have to end our marriage. People overcome affairs all the time. This wasn't an affair, Michael. It was a double betrayal that lasted 3 years. There's nothing to discuss." His demeanor shifted instantly from contrition to anger. "You'll regret this. I've already spoken to my attorney. I'm entitled to half of everything, including your precious house." His threat crystallized my resolve. The next morning, Jennifer filed for divorce on grounds of irretrievable breakdown of marriage, with supporting evidence of infidelity. We also filed for exclusive use of the marital home during proceedings, which the judge granted given the circumstances. As predicted, Michael attempted to hide assets. Joint accounts were suddenly emptied. Investment portfolios we'd built together disappeared from our financial tracking app. A vacation property in my name mysteriously had its mortgage fall into arrears. Jennifer was prepared for these tactics, immediately filing motions to freeze assets and demanding full financial disclosure. The judge, unimpressed by Michael's maneuvers, appointed a forensic accountant to track down everything. Meanwhile, my family launched a coordinated campaign to pressure me into reconciliation. My mother called daily with variations of the same message: marriages require forgiveness. Don't throw away 10 years over one mistake. When I pointed out it was 3 years of deception, not one mistake, she dismissed the distinction as nitpicking. My father took a different approach, focusing on financial consequences. Michael is a financial advisor. Do you really want to start over at your age? Be practical, Stephanie. Megan's tactics were perhaps the most shocking. She showed up at my office one afternoon, causing a scene in the reception area. "You're tearing apart our family because you can't accept that Michael loves me more," she shouted as security escorted her out. "He was always going to choose me in the end." Her outburst confirmed what my colleagues had likely already suspected, but the public humiliation burned nonetheless. My boss called me into his office afterward, offering compassionate leave if I needed it. I declined, knowing work was my only remaining anchor to normalcy. The divorce proceedings revealed more than I expected. Jennifer's team discovered Michael and Megan had opened a joint bank account 2 years ago, into which he had been depositing significant sums from our marital assets. They had researched real estate in California, apparently planning a future together once either Michael gathered the courage to leave me, or I conveniently gave up on the marriage due to his manufactured incompatibility. Email evidence revealed they had discussed having children together while I was undergoing fertility assessments, wondering if my obsession with getting pregnant would make the eventual separation easier or harder. The casual cruelty of their planning struck deeper than the physical betrayal. 3 months into proceedings, I made the decision to sever all communication channels with my family. I changed my phone number, email addresses, and social media accounts. I blocked their access to my professional profiles and instructed my assistant to refuse their calls. The day I implemented these changes felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. I sat in my home office, methodically deleting contact information for people who had been in my life since birth. With each deletion, the weight on my chest lightened incrementally. Selling the house proved emotionally complicated. Each room held memories that now felt tainted. The kitchen where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners. The living room where we'd decorated Christmas trees. The garden we'd planted together during the pandemic lockdown. I walked through each space one final time, saying goodbye not just to the physical structure, but to the life I had believed was real. The most difficult part was packing. Every object required a decision: keep, donate, or discard. Wedding photos went immediately to the trash. The handmade quilt from my grandmother, who had passed before witnessing this family implosion, I carefully wrapped for keeping. Michael's abandoned belongings I boxed for donation, finding unexpected satisfaction in giving away the designer suits he'd prized. 6 months after Discovery Day, we faced each other in court for the final divorce hearing. Michael had lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He avoided my gaze as the judge reviewed our settlement agreement. Thanks to Jennifer's skillful representation and the overwhelming evidence of Michael's financial misconduct and infidelity, the judge ruled largely in my favor. I retained most of our liquid assets, my retirement accounts, and received the proceeds from the house sale. Michael's attempts to claim half my company's stock options were denied based on his documented asset concealment. As the judge proclaimed our marriage legally dissolved, I felt no triumph, only profound relief. In the courthouse hallway, Michael attempted one last conversation. I never meant for any of this to happen, he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. But you made sure it happened anyway. For 3 years, I replied, then walked away without looking back. My final confrontation with my parents occurred at their home the following weekend. I arrived with a small box containing childhood mementos I wanted to keep, school awards, my first ballet shoes, photographs that predated Megan's birth. So you're really going through with this? My father said as I collected these fragments of my past. Throwing away your marriage, and now your family. I didn't throw away anything, I replied calmly. You chose Megan over me long before she slept with my husband. This just makes it official. My mother began crying, a performance that once would have weakened my resolve. We didn't choose anyone. We just wanted peace in the family. Peace at my expense isn't peace, Mom. It's sacrifice. And I'm done being the one sacrificed. I left their house knowing it would likely be the last time I crossed that threshold. The grief was there, but muted beneath the certainty that I was finally choosing myself. With my divorce finalized and family ties severed, I accepted a position with a competitor firm in Chicago. The company offered a substantial signing bonus and relocation package, eager to poach someone with my client roster and industry reputation. My new beginning took shape in a high-rise apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, minimalist and modern. Nothing like the craftsman house I'd shared with Michael. I furnished it sparsely at first, wanting to live with the space before committing to a design. This home would reflect only my tastes, my preferences, my life. The first month in Chicago passed in a blur of new responsibilities and explorations. I threw myself into work, impressing my new colleagues with ideas I'd previously hesitated to voice. Without Michael's subtle undermining, my confidence grew steadily. I discovered neighborhoods, restaurants, and lakefront paths that became my new familiar places. Therapy became a weekly constant, a Tuesday evening appointment with Dr. Chin, who specialized in betrayal trauma. She helped me understand that grief for my marriage and family was normal, even when their loss was ultimately beneficial. You're mourning who you thought they were, she explained during one particularly difficult session. That grief is valid, even as you recognize the reality was different. Making friends in a new city at 34 proved challenging, but not impossible. At a neighborhood book club, I met Kayla Barrett, a corporate attorney with a sharp wit and kind eyes. We bonded over our shared love of psychological thrillers and gradually began meeting outside the monthly club gatherings. After 6 months in Chicago, I faced my first holiday season alone. Thanksgiving approached with television commercials featuring happy families that once would have triggered painful comparisons. Instead, I organized a Friendsgiving for colleagues similarly disconnected from family. We cooked together in my apartment, drinking wine and sharing stories that had nothing to do with betrayal. As Christmas decorations appeared throughout the city, Kayla invited me to join her family celebration. No pressure, she assured me. But no one should be alone on Christmas unless they want to be. I accepted, spending December 25th with people who knew nothing of my history but welcomed me anyway. Kayla's mother sent me home with leftovers and a hand-knitted scarf, simple kindnesses from strangers that moved me more than expected. By the 1-year anniversary of Discovery Day, I had built something resembling a life again. Not perfect, not complete, but authentically mine. I had survived the unimaginable and found myself standing on the other side, changed but unbroken. Little did I know that the story wasn't quite finished, and the final chapter would begin with 100 missed calls. Exactly 1 year and 2 months after I left Seattle, my professional life had stabilized into a successful routine. I led a team of marketing specialists at the Chicago firm, my West Coast experience bringing fresh perspective to their campaigns. That particular Tuesday began with an important client presentation I'd been preparing for weeks. My morning commute featured the standard rush hour delays on the L train. Checking my phone for emails, I noticed the battery at a critical 5%. I'd forgotten to charge it overnight after a late call with our California office. With no time to stop for a portable charger, I switched to power-saving mode and silenced notifications to conserve the remaining battery life. The client presentation occupied my full attention for the next 4 hours. Our team pitched a comprehensive rebranding strategy to a healthcare conglomerate looking to update their image after a merger. As lead presenter, I fielded dozens of questions, drawing on research and experience to build client confidence in our approach. By early afternoon, we received the news. Our proposal had been accepted, complete with the additional budget allocations I'd requested for digital implementation. The team celebrated with champagne in the conference room, a professional triumph that validated my decision to relocate. "You've really found your voice here," my director commented as the gathering dispersed. "I can't believe you were ever anyone's second in command." The comment struck me as particularly meaningful given my personal history in both my marriage and family. I had indeed been relegated to a supporting role in my own life. Now, I was unquestionably the protagonist of my story. After wrapping up post-meeting documentation, I headed home around 7, stopping briefly at the grocery store for essentials. My phone had died hours earlier, but I wasn't concerned. Few people had my new number, and any work emergencies would go through multiple channels. Entering my apartment, I dropped my bags in the kitchen and plugged in my phone before changing into comfortable clothes and preparing a simple dinner. 20 minutes later, I remembered the charging phone and went to check for any important messages. The screen lit up with a notification that momentarily stopped my breath. 100 plus missed calls. Below that, 37 new voicemails and 42 text messages, all from the same unknown number with a Seattle area code. My first thought was that something had happened to Ashley, the only person from my previous life I still maintained contact with. With shaking hands, I called my voicemail and put it on speaker while I sat at my kitchen island. The first message began playing, and a familiar voice filled my apartment. "Stephanie, it's Michael. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please call back when you get this. It's important." His voice sounded strange, lacking the confidence that had once been his defining characteristic. The timestamp showed he had called at 8:17 that morning. The second message, from 8:45, "Stephanie, please. I wouldn't keep calling if it wasn't urgent. There are things you need to know." By the fifth message, his tone had shifted to desperation. "I know what we did was unforgivable, but this isn't about me or us. It's about the truth. You deserve the truth." I skipped through several similar messages until reaching one from late afternoon. "I've been calling for hours. Look, Megan was pregnant with my child. She lost the baby last month. That's not why I'm calling, but it's part of what you should know." My stomach clenched at this revelation, but I continued listening, moving to the most recent voicemail from just an hour ago. "Stephanie, I've sent you emails with evidence. Megan had this planned from the beginning. She manipulated both of us. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just think you deserve to know what really happened. Please call me back." I switched to reading the text messages, which contained similar pleas along with links to a shared cloud folder. With increasing disbelief, I opened the folder to find dozens of screenshots, documents, and audio recordings. The evidence was overwhelming and sickening. Text conversations between Megan and her friends revealed how she had targeted my marriage from the beginning, viewing Michael as an upgrade from her own relationship prospects. Journal entries she had apparently shared with Michael detailed her deliberate efforts to undermine my self-confidence while positioning herself as the superior alternative. Most disturbing were recorded conversations where Megan admitted to intentionally sabotaging birth control during her affair with Michael, viewing pregnancy as a way to force his hand in leaving me. The baby mentioned in Michael's voicemail had been conceived with exactly this purpose. As I scrolled through this digital archive of betrayal, my phone rang with that same Seattle number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, "Stephanie? Thank God." Michael's voice sounded ragged, as if he'd been awake for days. "I wasn't sure you'd ever pick up. I just saw everything," I said, my own voice distant to my ears. "Why are you sending this to me now?" "Because I finally understood what happened to us." "To you." He paused, and I heard him take a deep breath. "Megan lost the baby last month. During her breakdown afterward, she revealed things I should have seen years ago. How she'd planned everything. Studied your schedule to create opportunities, learned my vulnerabilities, and exploited them. And you're only realizing this now." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I was blind. Willfully blind. Another pause. "After you left, Megan and I tried to build a life together. It was a disaster from the start. She wanted to live your life, Stephanie. Wanted to redecorate the new house exactly like our old one. Wanted to take your job. She even tried to connect with your friends." The revelation was both shocking and strangely validating. Megan hadn't just wanted my husband. She had wanted my entire existence. "Ashley called me too," I said. "She received the same information. I sent it to her after I couldn't reach you. I thought she might know how to contact you." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, Michael explaining how Megan's pregnancy had initially seemed like a fresh start until her obsession with replacing me became impossible to ignore. After the miscarriage, her mask had slipped completely, revealing the calculation behind every action over the past 4 years. "I'm not asking for anything," he concluded. "I just thought you deserved to know it wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault." After ending the call, I sat motionless in my dimly lit kitchen, attempting to process this new perspective on my past. The betrayal remained, but its contours had shifted. Michael's weakness and my sister's pathology had combined into the perfect storm that destroyed my former life. Later that evening, Ashley called after receiving my text about Michael's revelations. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident even across the digital distance. "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted. "It changes nothing but somehow changes everything." "Do you think you'll talk to him again?" The question hung between us, complex in its implications. "I don't know. Part of me wants to keep the past firmly in the past. And the other part wonders if understanding everything might help me finally close this chapter completely." After we hung up, I found myself standing at my window, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering against the night sky. This city represented my independence, my rebuilding. Did I want to risk that hard-won peace by reopening old wounds? Around midnight, Kayla texted asking if I wanted to grab coffee the next morning. I explained the situation in a lengthy message, seeking perspective from someone who hadn't lived through the original events. Her response was thoughtful. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means releasing yourself from the burden of other people's actions. Whatever you decide, I'm here." I slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with fragmented scenes from my marriage and its aftermath. By morning, I had reached a decision. I would hear Michael out completely, not for his sake, but for my own. Full understanding might be the final piece needed for complete healing. I texted him suggesting we meet in person the following weekend. He offered to fly to Chicago, emphasizing that he didn't expect to stay in my home or infringe on my new life. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment, neutral territory where I could leave easily if necessary. The decision made, I felt an unexpected lightness. Whatever came from this meeting, I was approaching it from a position of strength rather than victimhood. My life was firmly my own now, and nothing Michael could say would change that fundamental truth. The coffee shop I selected for meeting Michael was called Lighthouse, a name that seemed appropriately symbolic. Floor-to-ceiling windows allowed abundant natural light, while the steady hum of espresso machines and muted conversations created enough background noise for privacy without awkward silence. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with clear sight lines to both exits. The familiar anxiety I had expected remained curiously absent, replaced by a calm certainty in my own resilience. Whatever happened in the next hour, I would remain intact. Michael entered precisely on time, scanning the room before spotting me. The physical changes in him were striking. The confident financial advisor who had once commanded rooms with his presence now moved hesitantly, shoulders slightly hunched. He had lost significant weight, his once tailored shirt hanging loosely from his frame. Most noticeable was the premature gray threading through his dark hair, aging him beyond his 39 years. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. "I'm not doing this for you," I replied evenly. "I'm doing it for me. Clarity might help me move forward completely." He nodded, accepting my terms without protest. After ordering coffee neither of us would finish. We faced each other as strangers who had once shared everything. "I want to start by saying I don't expect forgiveness," Michael began. "What I did was unforgivable regardless of circumstances. Just tell me what happened. The full timeline." For the next hour, Michael detailed the affair's progression with brutal honesty. It had indeed begun at our anniversary party, when Megan had sought him out during the celebration, claiming to need advice about investment options. She had orchestrated a private conversation, skillfully stroking his ego while subtly highlighting perceived problems in our marriage. "She studied you for years, learning your patterns and preferences. Then she became the opposite, positioning herself as everything you supposedly weren't. Spontaneous when she claimed you were rigid. Available when she suggested you were preoccupied with work." Their physical relationship began 3 months later, after Megan systematically created opportunities to be alone with Michael, each time pushing boundaries slightly further. She would casually touch his arm during conversation, suggest lunch meetings to discuss her portfolio, text increasingly personal messages about her dating disappointments. "I'm not excusing myself," Michael emphasized. "I made the choices that destroyed our marriage. But Megan was calculating in ways I never recognized until recently." The affair continued with Megan constantly reinforcing the narrative that I was emotionally unavailable, too career-focused, not meeting Michael's needs. She positioned herself as the understanding alternative, the woman who would prioritize him above all else. "When did you start planning a future together?" I asked, my voice steady despite the pain of these revelations. "About a year in." Megan started talking about how we could be together officially. She had detailed plans about timing, about managing fallout with you and your parents. "And you went along with it?" "Yes." He looked down at his untouched coffee. "I believed I was in love with her. I believed the stories we'd created about our relationship, about you." The most disturbing revelations concerned my parents' knowledge of the affair. According to Michael, they had discovered the truth nearly a year before I did, accidentally walking in on Michael and Megan at their house while I was at a conference. "Your father pulled me aside afterward and said, 'Stephanie can never know about this. Your mother told Megan that sometimes marriages go through phases and that discretion was important for everyone's sake.'" The betrayal expanded beyond what I had imagined, confirming suspicions I had tried to dismiss as paranoia. My own parents had prioritized family appearances over my emotional well-being, choosing to protect my sister's affair rather than my marriage. "After you left Seattle, things between Megan and me deteriorated quickly," Michael continued. "Without you as the common denominator, we had little connecting us. She became obsessed with recreating aspects of our marriage, suggesting vacations to places you and I had visited, wanting to use the same pet names. The pregnancy had been deliberate on Megan's part, a calculated attempt to secure Michael permanently. The miscarriage at 14 weeks triggered an emotional breakdown during which she revealed the extent of her manipulation, including attempts to access my email accounts and study my personal journals before the affair began. The night after she lost the baby, she was heavily medicated and started talking about how she'd finally won by getting pregnant when you couldn't. How she'd been planning to replace you since we got married. Michael pulled out his phone, offering to play a recording he'd made during one of Megan's subsequent confessions, but I declined. The details already painted a clear enough picture of my sister's disturbed psychology. "What about now?" I asked. "Are you still together?" "No. I moved out 3 months ago. Last I heard. She's dating my former best friend James." His laugh held no humor. History repeats itself, apparently. As our conversation drew to a close, I realized I felt nothing but distant pity for the man I had once loved. His weakness had caused immeasurable pain, yet he now seemed pathetically diminished. A supporting character in a tragedy of his own making. "I'm not asking for reconciliation," Michael said as we prepared to leave. "But I am truly sorry, Stephanie. You deserved none of this." "No, I didn't," I agreed. "But strangely enough, I'm grateful for where it led me. I like who I've become on my own." We parted without physical contact, the emotional distance between us now appropriately matched by physical space. I watched him walk away, expecting complicated emotions that never materialized. Instead, I felt surprisingly light, as if the final weight of my past had lifted. Back in my apartment, I experienced a delayed emotional release. Tears came suddenly and intensely, not from pain but from a profound sense of closure. I laughed through my tears, the release cathartic and cleansing. I called Ashley that evening, sharing the conversation's revelations. "It's strange," I concluded. "Learning the extent of their manipulation should make me feel worse, but instead it's somehow freeing. Because it confirms what you always knew," Ashley replied wisely. "That the failure of your marriage wasn't your fault. That your instincts were right all along." The following week, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike previous communications attempting to force reconciliation, this message contained a simple, straightforward apology. "We failed you as parents," he wrote. "There is no excuse for choosing silence over truth, for enabling behavior that hurt you so deeply. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize my failure and will regret it for the rest of my life." After careful consideration, I responded with limited engagement, establishing boundaries while leaving the door slightly ajar for future contact under strictly controlled circumstances. My mother remained conspicuously silent, presumably still unable to acknowledge her role in the betrayal. 2 months after meeting with Michael, I agreed to a dinner date with Jason, a marketing director I had met through a professional networking event. Our conversation flowed easily, touching on careers, favorite books, and Chicago's architectural history. When he asked about my past, I shared my story without the shame or hesitation that had previously accompanied it. "That's quite a journey," he said when I finished. "Thank you for trusting me with it." "It's just my history now," I replied, "not my identity." As spring bloomed across Chicago, I found myself reflecting on the lessons of the past 2 years. In my therapy session with Dr. Chen, I articulated the strange gratitude I now felt for the painful experience. "Before the betrayal, I was living half a life," I explained. "I accepted less than I deserved in every relationship. I doubted my perceptions even when evidence confirmed them. I prioritized keeping peace over honoring truth. And now?" Dr. Chun prompted. "Now I understand that my worth isn't determined by others' treatment of me. That trusting my instincts isn't paranoia. That sometimes losing people is actually gaining yourself." During a weekend alone at my apartment, I wrote a letter to myself documenting these realizations. I detailed the warning signs I had ignored, the red flags dismissed in the name of family loyalty or marital commitment. I acknowledged the growth that had emerged from pain, the strength discovered through necessity. The letter concluded, "You survived the unimaginable and emerged not just intact but expanded. The betrayal that was meant to diminish you ultimately revealed your capacity for resilience. Trust this version of yourself who knows that genuine love never requires self-erasure. Your worth was never the question. It was always their capacity to recognize it. 3 weeks later, I was promoted to executive creative director, the culmination of work that had become more innovative and authentic since my relocation. During my acceptance speech at the company dinner, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. Sometimes the greatest professional growth comes through personal challenge, I said to the gathered colleagues. 2 years ago, my life collapsed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Today, I'm grateful for that collapse because it forced me to rebuild with a stronger foundation. Looking back now, the 100 missed calls that once seemed so ominous actually represented the final piece of my healing journey. They provided answers to questions that had lingered in my subconscious, confirmation that my instincts had been correct all along, and freedom from any lingering self-doubt about my role in my marriage's demise. The path of healing is rarely linear. Some days still bring echoes of the past, moments of anger or sadness that arise unexpectedly. But these moments no longer define me or determine my future. They are simply emotional weather patterns, acknowledged and allowed to pass without judgment. If you're watching this and facing your own version of betrayal, please know that survival is possible. More than survival. Transformation awaits on the other side of pain. Trust yourself, even when others try to undermine your perceptions. Protect your peace, even when it requires difficult boundaries. Build a life that reflects your authentic self, not others' expectations. Have you experienced betrayal that ultimately led to growth? What helped you through the darkest moments? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support others finding this content when they need it most. Remember, your story isn't over just because a significant chapter has ended. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the most painful ones. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and I wish you strength and healing on yours.